as I said before, the intended result is that the code that you write in development is very closely to the code that's deployed. And um, obviously, Deno itself supports TypeScript and JSX out of the box. Ultra does as well. Obviously, those don't work in browsers, so we do need to transpile JSX and TypeScript to just be regular JavaScript. But after that, that's the only thing that Ultra does. It keeps your entire project structure exactly the same and serves it exactly the same as just vanilla JavaScript. So the the sort of tooling, the output, the all the magic that happens underneath the hood, it's fairly lean and straightforward.
This is 20-Minute JavaScript, a weekly show where I, your host, interview members of the JavaScript community about all topics concerning JavaScript. The 20-Minute JavaScript show is brought to you by OpenReplay, an open source session replay platform meant for developers. If you'd like to know more, visit openreplay.com. If you'd like to be on the show or suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at the 20MinJS. Welcome to episode number 30. I'm Fernando, and today I'm going to be interviewing Omar Mashaal. He's the creator of a very interesting web framework that combines React and Deno. He's the creator of UltraJS, and he's here to tell us all about it. So welcome to the show, Omar. Thank you for being here. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. My name is Omar. I've been a developer for about 15, 20 years now, and I've just been recently getting into open source development, and I'm going to talk about my project that we've been working on today.
All right, yeah, we're going to be talking about Ultra, but instead of me saying what it is, can you define it with your own words? How do you see your own baby?
Sure, it's a way to use React to build really dynamic JavaScript-powered websites, fairly similar to Next, where you could build really dynamic, media-rich content, and the workflow is quite similar. But the big differences are it's written all in Deno and is powered by import maps and 100% ESM from top to bottom. And I think the thing that we're really proud of is that we're using import maps in dev and also in production, which we don't see a lot in the JavaScript world today. And it massively does simplify your tool chain. You're not having a whole heaps of bundling and transpilation and yada, yada, yada. It's your source code is still shipped in production, very similar to how it's written. Your component structure is kept completely the same, and imports, exports, import maps all work as they do in development, which is really neat.
All right. So it sounds super interesting, but at the same time, you said a lot of things that I've never really heard together. You said a lot of React and Deno and import maps and so on. So I wanna understand what that means. But first, let's go to bundling, because I went through Ultra's site as well and README. You seem to pretty much hate bundling, and yeah, maybe, but at the same time, it's kind of inside every single other framework, or not every single, but most of other frameworks, and it's part of the development process of most usual web development frameworks. So let's start at the beginning, and can you define bundling so that we're on the same page, and why is it now such an intricate part, and then going to maybe why you hate it, why, or why you want to get rid of it.
Yeah, hate is a strong word, but
Okay.
I think we see bundling as sort of something that was needed in kind of times of a few years ago when browsers didn't support such native ESM, and you had to do a lot of weird tricks and things to kind of get your site to deploy across different browsers. And it really is. The world isn't like that anymore. All the major browsers support ESM natively for I don't know 2 or 3 years now, and import maps are supported in Chrome and in even Edge, and I think we have polyfills working for Safari and Firefox, which they're working on support at the moment. But when you use import maps, you actually can just import like you do natively in your development code, and the imports resolve natively in the browser as well, which is really interesting. And I think I'm surprised that a lot of other frameworks aren't looking into this at the moment. And I guess we've become so used to bundling, and it definitely is the standard practice at the moment. But I just I'm really interested in the world where that doesn't exist. You can write really modern JavaScript with all component driven, all with dynamic imports, and it works just like you think it would in the browser now. And I think that's the most interesting thing that we want to explore, um, because you can build really dynamic and interesting projects without having to kind of rely on bundlers, which will make one giant bundle, or these code split bundles that get split between routes, which they're never going to be perfect. There's a whole lot of complexity into these bundles that are getting built in a lot of other frameworks, and um, you know I wanted to kind of make a point of showing that you don't need to do that, and you could build really incredibly dynamic, content-rich websites without it. And I do think that in a few years' time, a lot of people will be jumping on to using import maps natively in the browser. Deno supports import maps on the server as well, which is really interesting. So it makes it very easy to kind of explore this sort of world, which we find interesting as well. So I guess it's trying to push away from the legacy of having to throw all of your code into a black box where it kind of spits out this code that you're just expecting to work right. And um, you know, things like Babel existed at a time when the original point was to write modern JavaScript and make it work in old browsers. But now we're writing like weird non-native JavaScript to make it work in modern browsers. And I feel that's kind of a weird thing that we've all become used to. But that's my personal take on it.
That's fair. I guess, yeah, Ultra could be seen as a very opinionated way of developing, but
Well,
if
more
it works,
browser native. I mean,
yeah.
the import maps that we use in development they can be used in production as well, um, which I think the closer you get to deploying what you actually write, the better off you are. I don't really see the web as like this target, which I think a lot of other frameworks see. It's like we're building for web, we're building this target which will go here, and we don't really care what the output is. With Ultra, I think we really try to be aware of what the output is, and we try to build in a way that kind of empowers that process. There's a lot of work that goes into code splitting, and when you use dynamic imports with just native ESM, things only get imported when you need them. So in a way, it really is like native code splitting. You have a route that has 50 components, and you have another route with 20 components. You're only going to import what you need if you build your app in a way that allows that, which I also find very interesting. Large code bases that can really scale well. I do think that this supports that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely so. So right now there is a bunch of tooling. There is a lot of processing that goes into getting that functionality there for everyone, like you said, and it's no longer needed. I mean, like you
Mm.
said, all major browsers now support the ESM, the actually module system that allows you to import files as you would in backend. So then really to your point, what's the point of bundling then if you can just do it natively? Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, some of the holdup, the hardest thing about kind of going to this route is that there's a lot of dependencies that aren't written for ESM. There's a whole the whole Node.js, common JS ESM thing that's still like quite up in the air, and it's not perfect, but if there's work done in some of these larger packages to make them more ESM compatible, like this kind of thought process and this option of building websites becomes way, way, way easier. And I'm really happy that there's a lot of really popular packages going to ESM now, and I don't think that's not going to slow down. So yeah, I do feel hopeful about all of that, and it will make all of this a lot easier.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the new standard after all. I mean, things tend to gravitate towards the standard at least when those
Mhm.
are strong and work fine and work great. So, and I think ESM is like that. So it's definitely just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if or anything. It's just a matter of when. All right. So you also said React and Deno. I'm not aware that I was not aware, at least, that React could work with Deno and the integration and so on. So i- is Ultra kind of trying to like mix or bridge the gap there, or how is that? How's that working? Is like Ultra a compatible version of React, or are you using the official React inside Ultra? How is that working?
Oh yeah, we're using the official React. So the neat thing about Deno is it supports TypeScript and JSX out of the box. So if you do import, anyone can import React from something like esm.sh and inside of Deno and start server-side rendering code. It's really, you don't need much tooling at all to do that. Deno supports the JSX transforms as well as TypeScript. So it really is great for this sort of workflow. The end goal of Ultra is to kind of make it easy to build server-side rendered apps with Deno and with React. And if you're familiar with the Next.js workflow, I think you're going to be really accustomed to how this works. You write components in a very similar way, but we are way less opinionated around how pages are set up and how you handle your data flow. Um, out of the box, Ultra will just give you server-side rendered React with import maps and full, you know, uh, server side and client side hydration. Um, After that, it's up to you. You could bring your own routing library or write your own. Use things like React Query, which we use for a lot of our data fetching examples. We try to kind of leave all the wires hanging for you to build the app that you want. You might not need complex routing for every project. You might not need data fetching. So we try to be as least opinionated as possible in that regard. Yeah, so out of the box, the only dependencies are React and Ultra itself, and um, from there you could kind of go on. Which I'm really happy with that approach because you should be allowed to kind of choose what sort of dependencies and how your app works. Which I think a
That's
lot of
fair.
other frameworks they try to they're really they push you into certain paths, which work well for the majority. But I always find myself coming up to a wall where I want to slightly change how things work a little bit, and um, yeah, I guess that's sort of what we kept it in mind to be as flexible as possible, while focusing on the sort of native standards.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess there is a point to the opinionated ones in the sense that you have more tools out of the box,
Mm.
but at the same time, yeah, when you hit that wall, it's a lot harder to overcome it. So, talking about React, you are also making quite a point in the documentation about streaming and React 18's suspense API being kind of core to Ultra, at least to the latest version.
Mm.
So, can you kind of explain because it's still kind of a new API? I mean, it's been around for a little while since 18 came out, but what can we do with this suspense API and when is it a good idea to take advantage of it, and when should we just stay away of it?
Yeah, sure. So suspense has existed in React, I think, from version 16, but it only worked on the client. I might be wrong on that, but the big thing around 18 is it now works for server-side rendering. And that what sort of piqued my interest with it was that a lot of other frameworks that we use, when you talk about data fetching, you usually push into some sort of like top-level pages approach where you request a lot of your upfront data at a top level page or template component, and it all kind of flows down. But if you want to make a data call further down in your tree, you're going to have most likely going to have to rely on doing that on client side after the page actually renders and refreshes, because um, it is a lot trickier before suspense. Um, the cool thing about server side suspense is that you could actually, if you set up your data handling correctly, you could call data from anywhere in your tree, anywhere nested as far down as you want, and that's able to be queried on the server. And so what the way suspense works is it can render the fallback component in the initial page stream, but actually resolve that data as it comes through as part of the stream, which is really neat. And there's a few ways you can use it. You can like prefetch data on the server if you want to make sure that everything is available without a doubt, and it works with all your SEO tags and so on. Or you could kind of wait for it to fetch as the stream is actually sent, which is two options of how you could use it. Which I just found that really interesting, and it kind of, when I first started writing Ultra, I was really intrigued with that sort of new way of data fetching. I really like the concept of not having to kind of be forced into some certain way to fetch data. It offers a lot more flexibility, and streaming just sounds really neat, and you get near instant responses, and there's a lot of fun ways you could kind of use it. We do a lot of ticketing work and our kind of client work, and we built ticketing systems where you could send the initial page data immediately, wait for it, because some of the ticketing calls are very slow. The stream stays open, the tickets get sent through the device, and it's just a really neat little seamless workflow that suspense, it wouldn't be possible without suspense, which I think is a good use case for it. Slow APIs are sort of their examples that they use, I think, as well in some of their demos.
Nice. That's very practical. So, leaving React aside for a minute, Ultra kind of claims to simplify the tooling, right? Required to like do web development. You kind of already hinted at the fact that you don't use bundling, but is that it, or are we also talking about something else, some kind of other improvement to the process of development?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to totally grasp down, but I think, as I said before, the intended result is that the code that you write in development is very closely to the code that's deployed. And um, obviously, Deno itself supports TypeScript and JSX out of the box. Ultra does as well. Obviously, those don't work in browsers, so we do need to transpile JSX and TypeScript to just be regular JavaScript. But after that, that's the only thing that Ultra does. It keeps your entire project structure exactly the same and serves it exactly the same as just vanilla JavaScript. So the sort of tooling, the output, the all the magic that happens underneath the hood, it's fairly lean and straightforward. And yeah, I mean, there will be a time we use CDN. There's a lot of ESM CDNs that are out there that help this process as well, like Skypack and ESM.sh, which will actually take like npm modules and make sure that they're ESM safe. So I mean, that's sort of where we offload a lot of our like heavy lifting. If we need a React version that's ESM, we go to ESM.sh or Skypack and get it from there. And there is a bit of hidden tooling in all of those CDNs, but the dream is that in the future we'll be able to use something like Unpackage or Skypack or something that where it actually just uses the source code that's published, and if eventually they do become ESM. So yeah, it's sort of deferred help, but all with the intention that in the future state of JavaScript, when everything is more ESM compatible, it will be a lot simpler, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. All right. So there is a phrase in the README file that I read, just didn't really understand what it meant. So I wanna bring it up. So you said Ultra is a bridge to use native browser features while using popular front-end libraries. Are we talking about ESM, or
Mm-hmm.
are you also referring to something else here?
Yeah, ESM and import maps specifically. I think if you're not familiar with what import maps are, I'd really recommend like digging into what they do. Like basically, you could use bare specifiers in all of your source code, and they resolve to whatever location you define. Normally, that's like an ESM CDN, which is totally fine for development. But it means that when you import React from React, that could work in production. You don't need to do any sort of bundling of React. Like it just looks for the bare specifier that's defined in your import map. That's like a really huge thing. And like, um, I'm surprised that I don't see other frameworks kind of pushing this. Even in the Deno space, they use import maps in dev, but they still do like bundling for production, which I find like really interesting. A minor aside is the only big framework that I could think of that is sort of leveraging import maps at the moment is Ruby on Rails. I don't know if you've looked at some of, I think it's version 16 they're on, but they're fully devoted to doing import maps inside of their framework, which I find really really interesting that they're sort of pushing that boundary as well, because they have some blog posts that they've written about it, and they also explain how it really simplifies the front end process where you could just write JavaScript, write modern JavaScript, and you don't have to rely on hoping that your Webpack is configured the right way and it's not going to mess up between route changes and stuff. You just write JavaScript, and that's ultimately what we want to do as well.
Right.
So I guess that's sort of where we talk about utilizing native browser features. Another common thing we hear around like unbundled ESM is if you have a deep network chain of imports, people talk about waterfalling, and there are things like service workers, which are also a browser native feature, which we really support using. And you could completely cache and service workerify your entire ESM code base so that it's always um, loaded from a service worker after the first load. And we've done a lot of work around making sure we have page insights and lighthouse scores that, most of our Ultra apps that we've deployed or get 100% across the board. So, and those are with full hydration, client-side routing, all React being loaded. There's not a lot of hidden uh, hidden tricks we're doing. Like
Right.
it's fully rendered React apps with full capability of client-side routing, and that's something I don't think a lot of developers are aware that they might lose when they start going around this sort of like islands, um, partial hydration approach. Client-side routing just won't work anymore, and I get why people might not want it, but I see a lot of people frustrated that that doesn't work. And I don't know. There's always a cost to benefit analysis with some of these
True.
hydration modes. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're using as many native browser features as we can while still delivering really insanely interactive websites. Which, if you're in the Next.js world, you're kind of used to that really highly interactive thing, and we try to make sure that we could have that exact same sort of user experience, but just with ESM, really.
All right. And so, question is, why did you go with Dino? Is it because of the native support for JSX and so on, or any other particular reason?
Yeah. Oh well, being they originally built as like really web API focused and driven, and that was one of I was in the Node world for years prior, and I used to run Node meetups here in Melbourne, and it was I was really frustrated with how hard it was to kind of move towards ESM over the past few years, and I, me and some of my friends, we were the first ones to kind of adopt ESM as soon as it hit experimental. We were always going full on in it, and from day one, we were always using it. And I was using Node with experimental modules for like 2 or 3 years while it was still dragging their feet around whether it should or shouldn't be implemented, and it's
Right.
still sort of iffy. So when Deno comes around and it just all that stuff works out of the box, and you don't need to use Pretty, or you don't need to use ESLint. It has all of that stuff baked in, and that's the stuff that would take me like I consider myself fairly experienced with Node, but anytime I start a new project, it would take me like an hour and a half just to make sure it's
Just to set it
working.
up. Yeah.
you
Hmm.
know, and with Deno, it's already set up, which is really good. So that's really, yeah. I mean, and as far as import maps go and ESM, I don't think something like Ultra is possible with anything else. I mean, nothing that I know of supports import maps to the level that Deno does. I don't even think Bun supports import maps yet, and Node, I haven't even tried to use import maps to be honest. But yeah, I think it's really only possible with Deno at the moment, unfortunately. But or fortunately, whichever way you look at it. But I do think some of the other runtimes will eventually catch up in that regard.
Yeah, they have no other option, I guess. That's where
Mm.
everything's going. So I'll eventually have to catch up. I remember when I interviewed Luca and Bartek from Deno, I asked both of them the same question about the tooling. Because that is something that really caught my eye about Deno, the fact that it brings up out of the box. It comes with all this tooling that for the Node community and in general JavaScript, it was built by the community. There were no official tools for that, like
Mm.
Prettier and test runners and so on. So why would what's the point on going through the effort of providing that kind of tools when eventually the community will rebuild them because everyone wants their own flavor of things. But by the looks of it, it seems like they're so good that there's no point of rebuilding it. You're using it and you're pretty happy with it.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of things where you just want it to work. Like, I mean, I wasn't really particular about my prettier setup. I mean, there was a few years where I wanted to use like no semicolons or something, but like at the end of the day, it's not really the thing that matters. And
Right.
um, I would, the hour and a half setting up a node project, I would probably just be going with whatever the standards were for ESLint and Prettier anyway. And so it's just getting all of that stuff to work together was really painful. And um, yeah, and very clunky. And you have a fairly large code base set up, and you don't even have a project written yet. Like
True. True. Absolutely. Yeah.
I always laugh at that a bit. And with Dino, it's just nothing. You have a blank project, and everything is like ready to go with all of that tooling built. It's way more um, catered for diving in and jumping in, developing things very quickly. Where Node is just a bit slower these days.
Yeah. I agree. I have to agree on that. All right. Finally, how long have you been working on Ultra? Because is it since 2015 or did I mess up the dates?
No, no. I think that I started it in I want to say about a year ago.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
want to say maybe June 2021. I'll look at the first commit, but yeah, I think it was around June of 2021. So it was it was right when I think Dino hit 1.0 and React 18 was in alpha. So like we were constantly trolling the React releases for all the new alpha releases because all of that streaming stuff was sort of they have two versions of streaming. They have node streams and web streams, and there was a lot of work. So Ultra uses the web streams, which is the web compatible stream API. Yeah, so it's been about a year, and it's been really good. I was really surprised that people were pretty interested in it right from the get go, and I think we released 1.0 earlier this year, maybe December or January, and we just released. Well, we're in beta of the 2.0, so I do recommend if you have looked at it before to check it out again because it's a big improvement with 2.0. It's the way more flexible. So yeah, it's been about a year.
Nice. I think I looked at the repo, but I'm probably messing up the dates now. But it's growing super fast then in that case. So, now to your point that saying that you're about to release 2.0, the official release candidate eventually. What's what's in the future for Ultra? Do you have any like features in mind that you like to implement, or maybe yeah, we have Fresh, we have Remix, we have the good old Next and Next, and there's a lot of variety actually in the web development ecosystem right now. Are there any, and that's just JavaScript. If you go out to other languages, even more variety. So, are there any like features that you like to implement from other frameworks that you just waiting for, all the time, or for JavaScript to be to have, or even React to have specific feature? What can we expect from Ultra?
There's a few things, yeah. I guess in terms of like waiting for features. Yes. So one of the things we're kind of interested in is React has started working on something called resources, which is supposed to help with how you handle head tags, styles, etc. Within streaming. Which you know, a lot of people who start looking into streaming, they're concerned about how head tags are rendered for SEO. Um, I think I mentioned before that we solve it by having the ability to prefetch data, which will ensure that it's always sent down the line as quick as possible. But React are working on something called resources, which let you send head data within the stream, and then it gets posted to the head. I just saw them working on that a few weeks ago, so I'm kind of keen because I think that's sort of one of the spaces where with streaming, it's still a bit up in the air around the best way to do these things. So that's something we're really looking forward to. Also, I hope React actually publishes ESM officially, which there's been an open issue for about 5 years now, and I think one day maybe they'll get there. In terms of what other frameworks are doing, there's a lot of interest in like partial hydration and hook and islands and things of that nature. We have a work in progress branch which actually shows you how to use islands within Ultra, which it's all working. We just want to do some testing before we merge it in. But the cool thing about Ultra is that you're able to choose how your app is rendered. You could choose full hydration, which is the default, and the way we suggest get the really nice interactions. You could do with no hydration, where you just send the HTML by itself with absolutely no JavaScript required. That's an option as well. And then we'll have islands, which will allow you to kind of mix and match where only certain parts of the app get hydrated. Personally, I'm a bit hesitant on the islands concept as a whole, just in terms of some of the features that you lose, but we will support that if that's the way you want to build it, because that's probably some of the things we're looking forward to.
Cool, interesting. I mean, yeah, I get your point about island, but there's definitely like a use case for every method, if you will.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
that way you get everyone. All right, awesome. That's it for Ultra. Now we have to move on to the next mandatory section of the podcast where I ask the same question to every guest. So I hope you're prepared. Question number one: what's the best advice you ever received?
That's a good question. I was thinking about this. I wanted to keep it developer related rather than
All right, fair enough.
completely arbitrary, but I think that it's okay to not use the latest and coolest tools just because everyone else is using them. And um, I'm I'm a bit I'm on the fence. I'm on the other side of the fence here, where I think it's okay to not use TypeScript if you don't want to. I think that the community as a whole is really pushing everyone to making this the standard, and I feel like developers are sort of forced into it. And while I get its pros and cons, I just think that it's okay if you don't want to use it. And I always tell everyone that, and I make sure that Ultra works with it and without it, and I never want to force anyone to make having to do that. But yeah, I just think in terms of the way the community is going, I think that sometimes that hinders things a little bit. And if we spent a fraction of the time making some of the larger projects on ESM, making them ESM compatible, I think we'd probably be in a better off state. But that might be a bit controversial. And I know it's not a one-to-one thing, but I just, my interests are more in the web native stuff and less in the non-native kind of things. And
Yeah.
I do hope that when comments as types comes through, which you might have seen that proposal, but it's a way to add type information to normal JavaScript. I think that I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, I guess in terms of the things that I'm looking forward to question, that would probably be number one. But yeah, I think that's still years away.
Yep. All right. I agree 100%. Yeah, there's no. I mean, if you're using PHP, you're good. You're good too. You're good. You're doing good. You don't have to be using the fanciest or the shiniest. If it works, it works. All right. Next question. What's the most exciting project you worked on?
I don't know if I mentioned, but our company Exhibitionist, which is what Ultra is published under, we do a lot of work with museums and festivals here in Australia. Just a few months ago, there's a big trend of winter festivals here where they'll take over the entire city, whether it's Melbourne or Hobart. And we do a lot of work with a lot of those festivals. And I mentioned before that we build a lot of ticketing solutions, and we ran tickets for hundreds of thousands of people between Melbourne and Hobart over the span of about 4 weeks. And that was all built with Ultra, and they were really quite modern sort of ways to enter events with custom mobile ticketing. So we had like animated QR codes and really nice animations on everything. So it kind of had a special feeling when you're going to events, which was stressful, but also very fun, and quite happy that everything seemed to go pretty smoothly with it.
Nice. All right. And final question. What is one thing you wish you knew when you started coding that you eventually picked up over the years?
Well, actually, just learning JavaScript. That was probably the one thing I wish I spent more time. When I started, jQuery was a real big thing, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I knew jQuery a whole lot better than I knew JavaScript when I first started, and I actually had to learn where that line was drawn, because it was very, as someone who just kind of self-taught, it's very easy to just fall down the jQuery rabbit hole and then dig your way out of it a bit. So yeah, I had some good people who I worked with who kind of, we kind of went on a jQuery detox years ago together, and just there was a site, you might not need jQuery or something, which is one of the greatest things. Whoever made that has done such a good job for developer learning. So yeah, eventually moving away from that, and then I actually started to learn how to actually write JavaScript. And sometimes I feel like we're in that situation again, but eventually I think we'll come back to learning JavaScript.
Yeah, I think it happens a lot now. Instead of jQuery, people just picking up a framework like React or Angular and thinking, well, that's the way, and then just moving out and not knowing where to go from there. I mean, I was there before jQuery, and I can tell you why everyone was using jQuery, because it was nice. You had to do everything manually otherwise. So yeah. But I agree with you.
It was the right tool. It was the right tool for the job at the time.
Yeah.
And we're in that situation again, where there were tools that were right for the time, and maybe it's time to go on. But it's interesting. Like, when tools outlive their time, that's when it becomes sort of problematic. But it's not having them be there is great at the time. It's just, I think as an industry, we sort of, it's hard to get people to continue to move on.
True. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It's hard. It's hard to leave the tool you know and pick up the one you don't know. Absolutely. All right. That's it. That's all the time we have, Omar. Thank you again so much for coming and discussing Ultra. It's definitely a project to look out for and to try out right now, actually. So before you go, please tell our audience where they can find you online if they want to know more about Ultra.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, easiest way is probably just go ultrajs.dev. That's our website. You could find us on GitHub too. If you search for UltraDeno, you'll probably be one of the first things. And maybe I'll post a link to my Twitter and on the show notes if that's possible. And
absolutely. Yeah, we'll have all the links that you mentioned so far. Everything will be on the show notes. But
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you again to everyone else listening. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right. Bye, everyone. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you haven't yet, take 10 seconds and leave a review of the show on your podcasting app. It will help us grow and reach more developers. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter at the 20MinJS. This episode was brought to you by OpenReplay, an open source session replay platform for developers. Visit openreplay.com to know more. And I'll see you back here next week.